We're back, and I'm very pleased to say we're joined by Chris Chmielenski. He is the deputy director of a really important organization in Washington, D.C. It's called Numbers USA. It does a superb job of educating all of us about what is actually happening at our borders and in the interior of our country that is eroding the rule of law in terms of the border and immigration security statutes of our country, and to what effect. Chris is one of the people that we turn to with regularity to get updates on this unfolding nightmare at the border. And I'm anxious to pick his brains about the large caravan that we're told is headed our way now, and that should be at some point in the not too distant future uh, darkening our doors, shall we say. Chris, it's good to have you back. Welcome, sir, to Securing America once again.
Thanks for inviting me back, Frank.
Happy to do so. Chris, I've been hearing that there's something on the order of 15,000 people in this caravan. We also talked with Todd Bensman the other day about whether that surge, if you will, in the form of this particular caravan has been slowed or even broken up by some efforts by Governor Greg Abbott, working with some of his Mexican governor counterparts. Give us a flavor of whether what we're witnessing is, in fact, a stay of execution, as they say, or the sentence has been commuted on this caravan.
Yeah, this is to me this is pretty scary stuff because if this caravan ends up getting to the United States-Mexico border, as of right now, the Biden policies would admit most of them into the United States and then resettle them in communities all across the country.
Mm.
So and I think once that happens, this is just the tip of the iceberg. You're just going to see caravans even much larger than this 15,000 person caravan that's making its way. So very important that it gets stopped. But as of right now, I'm not incredibly confident that that's going to happen. You mentioned Governor Abbott's efforts down there, but they haven't dealt with this size of people, and so far the Mexican government has been fairly willing to allow them. The national government has been fairly willing to allow them to continue passing through their country as long as they're heading up to the U.S. Mexico border.
Yeah.
So,
But I gather that's been the somewhat encouraging note sounded by some of these governors, is that they're basically bucking what their own federal government has been allowing to happen here. And,
exactly.
and the question is, does that incentive to these governors not to have Governor Abbott once again um, adversely affecting their trade, uh, keep them on the right side and keep these folks in Mexico? The Remain in Mexico policy, of course, that Donald Trump was rather celebrated for,
Right, right.
is no longer in place. So this is
Correct.
essentially just up to these governors in Mexico at the moment.
For the most part, right? In whether or not, and I mean, just like Governor Abbott down in Texas, I don't think these Mexican governors that are bordering the U.S. Mexico border, I don't think they want these large groups of folks in their communities either. I mean, we saw what happened in the special election down in Texas on Tuesday. Latinos
Mhm.
revolted against Democrats and gave a seat to the Republicans because
Yes.
you can see the deep concerns in these communities down in these border areas about what's happening down on the border, and it's starting
Mhm.
to have ramifications at the polls, which we knew would happen. We started to see glimmers of it in the earlier special election in the Democratic primary down in Texas in Henry Cuellar's district.
Right.
So um, I, whether something happens, it's still, there's nothing coming from the Biden administration. The Biden administration really isn't speaking at all about this. They
Yeah.
can say, don't come as much as you possibly can. But when Mexico gives them a free pass and they show up, and the policy is basically right now, let them all in. and help them resettle, turn them over to these NGO groups that are, they're even saying that they're overwhelmed, but
Mm.
it's their job to help out, and they know there's money in it at the end for them. So they're willing to do everything they can to help relocate these people across the United States.
Yeah.
So
Let's talk a little bit about that, Chris, because that's
sure.
the other piece of this that's so concerning is, of course, it's not just the border communities that are being adversely impacted. The policy of the Biden administration is now clearly to spread the pain around, or at least to spread these illegal immigrants around, including a lot of them, it seems, into red states, with presumably an impact on elections going forward if they're if one's not being too cynical about this. Talk a little bit about the extent to which that uh, dissemination of this huge mass of illegal aliens is taking place now, literally throughout the country.
Right. We caught wind of a new plan that's being developed in the Department of Homeland Security. They're actually insiders inside DHS. Members of the Biden administration are jokingly referring to it as the Abbott plan, sort of mocking Governor Abbott of Texas because of what he did a few weeks ago, I guess it was, where he was loading illegal border crossers onto buses and shipping them up to DC.
Right.
So the administration is essentially admitting through this plan that they're going to be overwhelmed at the border,
Mm.
and they need a backup plan. They can't house all of these people and process all of these people that are crossing the border illegally, or that they expect to cross the border illegally in the border regions themselves. So they're developing this plan where they're going to have buses ready to go, and they're going to start shipping these folks all across the country. You know, Los Angeles is one of the top destinations,
Mm.
but they're talking about pretty much all the cities in Texas, some cities in the southeast, other Midwestern type cities, other cities located in the Midwest.
Yeah.
So we've it, I say it's become somewhat of a cliche, but it really is. It's every town is now a border town
Yes.
because of what the Biden administration is doing in resettling these illegal border crossers everywhere.
So, Chris, one of the things that we look to Numbers USA to do is to give us a sense of the costs of all of this, as well as just the sheer volume. Um, how are the expenses of these, well, now several million people that have come in since the Biden administration took office being covered? Is that something that these local communities are being expected to ante up for, or is the federal government doing it? You mentioned some of these refugee resettlement operations. I know they get paid handsomely in some cases. But what is the impact on the taxpayer of it all?
Right. Most of it is being pushed upon, dumped on the states and the local communities.
Mm.
When you have a family unit that crosses the border illegally, and they have, let's say, there's an 8-year-old child that's part of that community, and they get relocated to, let's say, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and that 8-year-old starts going to school. That cost is put on the Pittsburgh city schools. So that falls directly on the shoulders of the taxpayers in those local communities. The federal government's not doing a ton to help out those communities, especially where they're relocating all these people. So that's one
Not
aspect of it.
doing a ton other than
Not doing
exacerbating
a
the
ton other
problem.
than dumping them into their communities, right?
Yeah.
But we did see, so earlier in the week, or at the end of the last week, part of this summit of the Americas that President Biden took part in. He announced a new agreement where he would take $65 million, not a huge sum of money, but I wouldn't mind having $65 million, but he's taking $65 million of the leftover funds from the American Rescue Plan, the COVID relief money, and he's taking that to help farmers bring in some of these illegal migrants, bring them in legally through the H-2A guest worker visa program. So, one thing, it begs the question: why has Congress been asking for, especially Democrats, been asking for more COVID relief money when we've got this money left over that now we're going to use to deal with the border crisis? But I imagine they're going to try to find some of these funds that have gone unused and try
Mhm.
to use that to help pay for some of the relocation of these illegal border crossers, which is somewhat ironic because every single time Trump tried to move money around to deal with anything that was happening with the immigration enforcement, you know, all heck broke loose on Capitol Hill.
That's
You know,
exactly
now
right.
it's business as usual.
Let me ask you quickly, and we've only got about a minute left, Chris Chmielenski. We have among this immense number of people who have come here illegally, a disproportionately large number of unaccompanied military age men. A lot of them are just in that getaway category. They've made a point of not getting caught.
Right.
But some of
Right.
them are people who have been processed, such as they have, but they've got no background to speak of. And their intentions towards our country are unclear at best. How serious a national security problem does Numbers USA believe they represent?
It's a big one, and that's how we view the border. You know, we're mostly focused as an organization. We're mostly focused on the overall immigration numbers. Certainly, when you have an immigration surge, a border surge, a border crisis, that's resulting in, we're up to close to 1 million illegal border crossers that are being released into the United States. Certainly, that impacts overall immigration numbers. But we look at the border mostly as a national security, public safety type issue, and the cartels, the transnational, very dangerous criminal cartels. They love these 15,000 person cartels because
Yeah,
it so overwhelms the border region
yeah.
where they come that it just opens up whole other vast sections of the border where they can bring in
Chris,
drugs and people that they don't want to
this
bring
is
in through
this
the
is a topic
caravans.
to which we're going to return with you soon. Thank you for the
Yeah.
work you do at Numbers USA. Keep it up and keep us abreast of what you're doing. Next up, we're going to talk with Robert Charles about the upsurge in domestic violence right after this.